Imagine for a moment, you're only 12 years old. Your city is surrounded by Nazi tanks. Armed soldiers march through the streets, and suddenly you find yourself face to face with the most feared man in the world, Adolf Hitler. What would you do? Would you run, hide, cry in fear? Well, in 1944, an Austrian boy named Franz Jägerstätter Jr. did something that would change not only his life, but the fate of thousands of people. He looked into Hitler's own eyes and did something impossible. This is the real and extraordinary story of how innocent words from a child melted the stone heart of a tyrant. A story that history books rarely tell, but one that needs to be heard. Stay until the end, because what you're about to discover will change your perspective on the power of words and the strength of innocence in the face of absolute evil. To fully understand this story, we need to go back to 1944. World War II was at its peak. Hitler and his Nazi troops dominated much of Europe with an iron fist. Austria, annexed to Germany in 1938, had been living under Nazi occupation for 6 years. Small Austrian towns and villages were constantly visited by German troops, who requisitioned supplies, recruited young men for war, and eliminated any sign of resistance. St. Redigan was one of these small towns. With just over 500 inhabitants, it was nestled among the Austrian mountains. It was a place where everyone knew each other, where children played freely through cobblestone streets, and where life followed a simple and peaceful rhythm. But in March 1944, this peace would be shattered. Franz Jägerstätter Sr., a local farmer, had become a silent symbol of resistance. He refused to serve in the German army, claiming that his Christian faith did not allow him to participate in a war he considered unjust. This refusal cost him his life. In August 1943, Franz Sr. was executed by the Nazis, leaving behind a wife, Franziska, and 3 young daughters. But there was also Franz Jr., his 12-year-old stepson, whom the farmer had raised as his own son. Young Franz was known in town for his gentle nature and insatiable curiosity. He had blonde hair, clear blue eyes, and that typical innocence of a child who still saw the world with hope, even amid the chaos of war. No one could imagine that this ordinary boy was about to star in one of the most extraordinary moments of World War II. It was a cold March morning in 1944. Franz woke up to a different sound echoing through the mountains. It wasn't the church bells or the lowing of cattle. It was the threatening roar of military engines. A convoy of German military vehicles was climbing the winding road that led to St. Redigan. But these weren't ordinary soldiers. The flags fluttering on the cars indicated something much more significant. It was an official visit from high-ranking Nazi commanders. And in the main car, protected by a heavy escort, was Adolf Hitler himself. The news spread through the city like wildfire. "The Führer is coming! Hitler is arriving," whispered the residents, some with fear, others with morbid curiosity. Franz, like any 12-year-old child, was seized by irresistible curiosity. While adults hid in their homes or nervously clustered on street corners, the boy strategically positioned himself in the town's central square. Why had Hitler chosen to visit such a small and insignificant town? The answer was sinister. St. Redigan had become a symbol of passive resistance after the execution of Franz Sr. and other local men who refused to serve in the German army. Hitler was coming personally to make an example. His intention was clear: to transform the city into a symbol of what happened to those who defied the Third Reich. The plan was brutal. After his diplomatic visit, special SS troops would publicly execute the remaining community leaders, deport problematic families to concentration camps, and then St. Redigan would be completely evacuated and destroyed. The small town would be wiped off the map as a warning to other communities that dared to resist. But Hitler didn't count on Franz. When the convoy finally arrived at the central square, the silence was deafening. Hitler stepped out of his armored Mercedes-Benz, surrounded by SS guards. He wore his impeccable military uniform, the swastika gleaming on his arm. His cold eyes swept the gathered crowd, looking for signs of fear, submission, or resistance. That's when he noticed the boy. Franz was there, alone, just a few meters away. He showed no fear, wasn't hiding behind adults. He was just watching, with that pure and fearless curiosity that only children possess. For a moment that seemed eternal, Hitler's eyes and Franz's eyes met. What happens when absolute evil meets absolute innocence? This philosophical question was about to get a real answer on the streets of a small Austrian town. Hitler, accustomed to seeing fear and reverence in people's eyes, found something completely different in Franz's gaze. There was no hatred, no fear, no worship. There was just genuine curiosity. Against all security protocols, Hitler approached the boy. His guards were visibly nervous, but didn't dare interfere. Wie heißt du, mein Junge? Hitler asked in German. What's your name, boy? Franz, mein Herr, the boy replied, with the simple politeness his mother had taught him. Hitler smiled. It was a strange smile, almost nostalgic. Perhaps in that moment he remembered his own childhood in Austria, or maybe he saw something in Franz that awakened some remnant of humanity buried long ago in his soul. And what do you want to be when you grow up, Franz? The question caught everyone by surprise. Here was the most powerful and feared man in Europe, making casual conversation with a child in a public square. Franz thought for a moment, with that seriousness that children show when questioned about their dreams. I want to be a farmer, like my stepfather was, Franz replied. He taught me that the land gives us everything we need, but only if we take good care of it. He said that planting is an act of faith. You put a seed in the dark earth and trust that something beautiful will grow. Hitler fell silent. The mention of the stepfather should have been a reminder of the Jägerstätter family's betrayal. But instead of anger, something different crossed the dictator's face. And you're not afraid of me, Franz? Hitler asked, his voice surprisingly soft. The boy shook his head. My mother taught me that we should only fear things that can hurt our soul. And you're just a man like any other. Men can hurt our bodies, but they can't touch our souls, unless we let them. Franz's words echoed in the silent square, like stones thrown into a calm lake. Even the SS guards seemed to have been touched by the profound simplicity of that observation. Hitler stood still, processing what he had just heard. Here was a child, son of an executed traitor, talking about faith, hope, and the indestructibility of the human soul. Then, something extraordinary happened. Franz took something out of his pocket. It was a small wooden cross, hand-carved, simple, rustic, made with love. My stepfather made this for me before he left, Franz said, extending the cross to Hitler. He said that whenever I felt lost or afraid, I should remember that there's something greater than our problems, something that connects us all. Do you want to keep it? You look more scared than I am. In that moment, something impossible happened in the square of St. Rodigan. Adolf Hitler, the man responsible for millions of deaths, who had ordered the extermination of entire peoples, extended his hand and accepted the small wooden cross from a child's hands. Witnesses present would later report that they saw tears in the dictator's eyes, tears that no one thought he was still capable of shedding. Hitler held the cross for a long moment, observing the simple craftsmanship. Then he looked at Franz again. Your stepfather, was he a man of faith? Yes, Franz replied without hesitation. He said that faith isn't about believing in easy things. Faith is about doing what's right even when it's difficult, even when no one is watching, even when you might be punished for it. He was punished, Hitler said, almost whispering. Yes, Franz agreed, his voice still sweet and without bitterness. But my mother says he chose to die standing rather than live on his knees, and that when we make the right choice, we're never truly alone. Hitler placed the cross in the inner pocket of his uniform, close to his heart. What happened next shocked everyone present. Hitler knelt in front of Franz, getting to the boy's eye level. Franz, he said, his voice trembling, I came here today to do terrible things, to punish your city for what I consider disobedience. The boy just listened, without judgment, without fear. But looking at you, hearing your words, I remember when I was your age. I remember dreams I had, hopes I carried. I remember when I still believed the world could be a better place. Hitler stood up, his posture completely changing. He turned to his commanders, who were watching the scene with a mixture of confusion and alarm. Herr Oberfuhrer, he said to the SS commander, change of plans. St. Radigun is under special protection of the Reich. No punitive action will be taken here. The commander tried to protest, but mein Führer, the orders were... The orders have changed, Hitler roared, his authority returning momentarily. But then, looking at Franz again, his voice softened. Sometimes a leader must be wise enough to change direction when he encounters a greater truth. He addressed the gathered crowd. Citizens of St. Radigun, you have a treasure here, a child who reminded me of something I had forgotten long ago. Take good care of him, and he will take good care of you. On March 20th, 1944, Adolf Hitler left St. Radigun without executing a single person, without deporting a single family, without destroying a single house. The small town that should have been wiped off the map was completely spared. More than that, Hitler left specific instructions that St. Radigun should never be molested by German troops for the rest of the war. But the story doesn't end there. In the following months, Hitler always carried with him the small wooden cross that Franz had given him. Close officers noticed subtle changes in his behavior. He had personally canceled several punitive operations against civilians in other Austrian towns. In his personal memoirs, discovered decades after the war, Hitler wrote, "Today I met a boy who reminded me what it means to be human. In his eyes, I saw not what I became, but what I could have been." Franz, of course, didn't know the full impact of his words. For him, it had just been a conversation with a man who seemed sad and lost. He continued his simple life in St. Radigun, helping his mother on the farm, studying at the local school, playing with friends. The war ended in 1945. Hitler committed suicide in his bunker in Berlin, but until the end, according to reports of his final moments, he was holding a small wooden cross. Franz grew up and became exactly what he had said he wanted to be, a farmer. He never sought fame or recognition for what he had done. For decades, few knew the real extent of his influence on that March day. He married, had children, and lived a simple and happy life until age 89. When he died in 2021, the entire town of St. Radigun attended his funeral. On his grave, along with fresh flowers, there are always small wooden crosses left by visitors from around the world. But perhaps the most impressive part of this story is what happened to St. Radigun after the war. The town became an international symbol of peaceful resistance and the transformative power of compassion. In 1998, Franz Sr., Franz Jr.'s stepfather, was beatified by the Catholic Church, recognized as a martyr who died defending his Christian principles. And St. Radigun, the small town that should have been destroyed, not only survived, but thrived. Today it is visited by thousands of people every year who come to see the place where a 12-year-old boy changed the heart of one of history's most feared men. Franz's story leaves us with profound questions about human nature, the power of words, and the strength of innocence in the face of evil. How is it possible that a child could achieve what entire armies could not? How could simple and gentle words penetrate a heart that seemed completely hardened by cruelty? The answer may lie in the very nature of innocence. Franz didn't see Hitler as a monster, but as a human being who had lost his way. He didn't respond to fear with more fear, but with genuine compassion. In that crucial moment, Franz didn't try to convince Hitler through complex political or moral arguments. He simply offered what he had, his pure humanity, his simple faith, and a symbol of hope made by his stepfather's loving hands. This story reminds us that each of us carries within ourselves an immense power, the power to touch and transform other lives through kindness, compassion, and the courage to do what is right. Franz didn't just save his town that day, he saved the soul of a man we thought was lost forever. And in doing so, he showed us that it's never too late for redemption, never too impossible for transformation. Final pause. In a world that sometimes seems dominated by anger, hatred, and division, Franz's story offers us something precious. Hope. Hope that gentle words still have power. Hope that innocence can overcome cruelty. Hope that each of us, no matter how young or seemingly insignificant, can change the world. The next time you feel too small to make a difference, remember Franz. Remember that sometimes the greatest transformations begin with the smallest gestures of love. And who knows, maybe you too carry in your hands a small wooden cross, ready to be offered to someone who has lost their way. This was the extraordinary story of Franz Jägerstätter Jr., the boy who saved his city and touched the heart of a tyrant. A true story that reminds us of the transformative power of human compassion. If this story touched your heart, share it. The world needs to be reminded that good can always overcome evil, not through force, but through love. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to be notified about our next extraordinary story.